31.
No,
All right. Well, dear family. Obviously, this is a challenging time for all of us. There are many things going on. Some wonderful things, but a lot of really devastating, concerning things. So I thought I would pick up that thread and talk about it a little bit and bring to light Rinpoche's letter and talk about that. And I think everybody that I see on screen has already seen it. And I thought that if people are joining us who didn't see it, it's also kind of a line into some pretty important things, you know, in the Buddhist tradition. A very elegant letter, very deep letter, beautifully evoked or translated by Eric. So I'll just remind you of some of the powerful points that he makes and reflect on them. And if we remain such a small group, why we could reflect together and talk together. Don't have to give just a one-person talk, but I was so struck by it. You know, I typed it out from, Eric left me a voice message. And even as I was typing, it just struck me as so powerful. I really hear Rinpoche's voice in it. I really hear the wisdom. If anybody's listening on YouTube who doesn't know, this is our teacher who lives in Tibet, certainly has many challenges from many sides. And speaking about this situation, one of the things he says is that, of course, the absence of a proven cure makes us anxious. It fills us with intense trepidation. We all wonder, is it going to keep spreading? Are we going to get it? Is someone near and dear to us going to get it? These thoughts create unease. But despite the presence of this danger, we can reflect on a vital aspect of our being human, which is that we have real potential as human beings. And for us inside the Buddhist tradition, obviously, this directly mirrors a deeply held conviction in our life of understanding how Buddhism sees human beings, which is that we have enormous potential. We have the potential to awaken completely from our limitation. So Rinpoche goes on, he says, this ability means we have the capacity to implement effective methods. And then this sentence just struck me like a gong. It was the first for me kind of gong sentence. As such, we are encouraged to don the armor of fortitude and adopt a greater scope of mind, a bigger mind, a wider mind, a broader mind, a deeper mind. You know, it's so easy to become absolutely consumed by a worry. And never mind the virus, it's easy to become absolutely consumed by pretty much any little thing that's on our plate and bothers us. You know, we don't have ice cream in the freezer, or I got a mosquito bite. I mean, we know how this goes. Somebody says something we don't like, and all of a sudden the mind is not vast or broad. It's like snaps down. That's like the one thing in existence, and we're zeroed in on it, and we're frenetic and reactive. And I'm not saying anything you don't know, anything I don't know from my own experience. So at this moment, for Rinpoche to use this kind of wording and say a greater scope of mind, you know, and I think we all know what that is. It's a greater, it's wider. We know it from our practice. We know it from walking in nature. We know it from feeling love for the people around us. This is a greater scope of mind. It's greater in every way. It's more powerful. It feels greater. It feels that we actually have some depth and breadth, and we're not just this little tiny flea in the wind, although we are also in some sense that. So he says, adopt a greater scope of mind and vision, perspective. This is a very important point. This itself will benefit us all. So hi, I see a few people have just joined. And so I'm pulling out some, for me, big highlights from Rinpoche's recent letter. as we are all coping with these difficult times that he addresses in his letter. This was actually an address he addresses it to brothers and sisters of Greater Tibet. It is on his Tibetan website, and Eric picked it up from there and very kindly translated it. So I'll just continue. This is what we're looking at now. Talking about the potential that we have to have a greater scope of mind and vision. He says this itself will benefit us. That is so important. You know, our minds immediately go, or at least my mind immediately goes when I think, oh my goodness, you know, people don't have masks, they don't have protective gear, ventilators aren't getting distributed, people working in grocery stores don't have masks. You know, there's immediately this kind of litany that starts up in my chest and think, what can I do? You know, that sort of, and of course, anything we can do is extremely important. But this moment of recognizing that just having a greater scope of mind, however we understand that, I don't know, does that sound true to you? It seems to me to be a big insight, actually. And then we can possibly start to reflect on what we can actually do. And then he goes on to talk about the external level, as he puts it, scientists and doctors are doing their best, really being tremendously heroic, as he says later in the letter. And that's what we can do. That's the task that we have right now as a cohort of human beings, to figure out what to do, distribution of what's needed, vaccines ultimately, accurate tests, enough tests, all of those things. That is a task for us. This is the task that has been put into their hands, doctors, administrators. That's the external help that we can hope for. And then going on, building on this sense of our potential, figure out. He says in a similar fashion, internally, because we're not just leaving the job to other people, there is a job for us, even in our houses. My interpretation, a really important job. Well, staying in our houses is a very important job. Not having contact that's dangerous to ourselves and others and to the whole society, to the doctors, to the nurses, to the ambulance people, and so on. We should cultivate a lofty and a vast mind of good intentions. Good intentions. As he's going to elaborate, of course, this means not circling entirely around our own concerns, compelling as they are, but, you know, going along with that vast and lofty mind is thinking about all the other people who are in this situation with us. And as we said the other night, it's kind of a stunning situation, you know, as we start to think of our concerns raised by the virus. We realize that anywhere we think of on the globe, people are worried about exactly the same thing. So often disaster seems in other people's countries. I think we're kind of used to that in this country. You know, the war is over there, the starvation is over there, but it's here. We are all human beings together. And it's a pretty profound thing to recognize, I believe. Because we don't, especially in a rich country like, or formerly a rich country. So vast mind and good intentions, a greater vision in a state of ease. Again, inviting us, as he'll say explicitly, you know, to be anxious and agitated won't help. It won't help us. It is a natural human response, no blame, but we also know it will not help. It won't give us the clarity that we need to go forward. You know, people who my neighborhood email is complaining about seeing people standing next to their cars and talking without, you know, proper distance between them, and getting irritated and angry at people, or people in New York texting about the other people who are still going to restaurants and bars, or at least they were recently, and feeling agitated about that. But that won't help. Our greater vision in a state of ease allows us to see, yes, people sometimes fail to take seriously things that are very serious. It's kind of a pretty major trait among human beings. We're not, somebody pointed out that our brains aren't actually built to think deep, deep, deep into the future. But now we're called upon to do this. We must think in terms of decades and centuries and generations and eons even. So that's what we can do when we have a vast vision. And then emphasizing, as I said, important not to give rise to agitation or fear, but to remain very relaxed. That's a challenge, and to maintain equanimity. I've been reading some of the words of Majid Lepton and preparing for our retreat, and you know the practice of severance, and she, but this is a very broadly applicable point that she makes, that Rinpoche is making here, that, you know, she says, if you want to know, she's talking to one of her sons, and she says, if you want to know what's like a sign of success in practice, it's not being so afraid in circumstances that would ordinarily bring fear. And finally, for the most excellent person, it's even seeing these challenges as what the Tibetans call ornaments of our practice. Being able to see that these things too arise from multiple causes and conditions, are dependent arisings, are manifestations just simply of the nature of things. These are profound realizations, and they come through our having a broad mind and a deep vision. And, you know, it's interesting the way Rinpoche is speaking of these things, again, in a very general sort of common sense, human way. And yet we know, if we're familiar with Buddhism, that he's also introducing very central principles. This is a nice thing. He says, the origin of the contagious virus is this world, our world. It comes from the same world we come from. Not too many people are reminding us of that. And his follow-up to that, as you may remember, is therefore it can be remedied through the infallible operation of interdependence, through employing a variety of substances, things that grow on this planet, medicines, and the use of mantra, as we did yesterday in our Tara practice. And then he kind of really gets down to it. He says, so keep this in mind. We hold to the essential principles of integrity and love while engaged in actions. So this big vision that he's talking about is a vision that can precipitate activity on our part, whatever it may be that we are capable of. Staying connected with family, encouraging other people less able than ourselves to maintain some kind of equilibrium. That's a huge contribution. Reminding friends and family, wear your mask if you must go out, stay indoors if you possibly can. We have some influence among our own circle. And that's important. None of us can change the world the way we'd really like to. You know, don't you feel sometimes I just like to stand on some really, really high platform and say, stop, you know, but you can't do that. But we can influence each other. We can strengthen each other's intentions. And that's a lot of why we're gathering together. In fact, this predicament has arisen due to ignorance, arrogance, and the desirous, greedy mind. We are seeing that. Price gouging on life-saving masks. Other people giving them away at the cost of their lives. Good and bad coming in together. Exasperating that predicament is holding ourselves dear, but having little empathy for others, holding them dear. Now, I know all of you, who know each other, we are focused quite significantly on developing this kind of understanding that everyone is just like us, wants happiness just like us. That is so simple and so easy to forget, when we're caught up in the drama, and it is quite dramatic, of what it is we want and we need and what we fear. In the unfolding of events, it's our responsibility to be conscientious of the causes of our own actions, karma, cause and effect. We must mindfully increase positivity. We definitely should not take advantage of the fear of others or exploit them to derive profit. Interesting that he brings this up. This is wrong in their state of duress. Avoid all negative intentions and actions. To seek advantage while others lose is completely and unworthy and inappropriate, and also belies the state that we are actually in, what we are actually discovering. And I'm sure you have thought about this. What we are actually discovering is that the cause and effect interdependence of the way our entire world is structured means that our actions are very significant for each other. And we've always kind of known that, and it's very dramatic now because the contagion of the virus and its spread around the world has to do in part with either not recognizing or not being willing soon enough to take measures that are necessary, recognizing that what we do can impact an entire city, entire country. There was one, remember the first case in Seattle, somebody had landed in Seattle from China. It spread so quickly, and there's no such thing as being okay if others aren't okay. That seems to be a really important thing that we are learning. You can't be safe in your castle if the people outside are starving and sick. We have to take care of everyone. And that's not a political statement. I'm thinking in terms really of, it's just a simple fact that as interconnected as we are, as closely as our lives are intertwined in so many ways, economically, the food chain, the service chain, the life chain of air itself, we have to live in a way that takes everyone into account. This is really mandated, and there are very few cultures, societies that seem to be doing a good job of this. And never before has it been so clear that the people in the poor area of town, if I don't, participate in some way in bringing them forward, or around the world, as Carolyn dedicates her life to doing, bringing people forward wherever they are, supporting that, others who do that. Not only is that appropriate because they're human beings, and most of you think of animals, because living beings suffer, and it is our heart to address that suffering in whatever way we can. And not only that, we're discovering, not only is that the right thing to do, it's a dangerous thing not to do. So Rinpoche seems to me to be laying all this out or alluding to all of this just very simply when he says, please don't discard the workings of cause and effect and be caught up only in selfish attachment to this life. Consider how actions now will affect future outcomes. My wish is that you have pure, loving intentions with the inspiration to benefit others. He speaks about the immense inspiration of the truly, as he describes, heroic doctors selflessly helping others at the cost of their lives. And we have lost many people who are the peak of their careers, 20, 30, 40 years of experience and training to offer the world. And they're gone because there wasn't protective care, because it wasn't planned for, because somebody wanted to profit, somebody didn't believe it. So we may not be able to emulate such amazing sacrifice, but most certainly we keep their examples in our hearts with gratitude and let them inspire our activities and intentions. This will benefit the deceased. This is our belief. Our good thoughts for those past helps them. And actually, in the Buddhist way, we believe in helping them helps the world because it allows them to transition into a better situation and come forth again as inspiring leaders. This will benefit the deceased and the living and make everything worthwhile. Our actions may not be on a grand scale, and yet we can be very impactful in our own circles. So important, so significant, so simple, so obvious, and an introduction into the fundamental workings of the universe. Dependent arising, karmic, cause and effect. And this is something that can be worded in different ways. Just as I was thinking about things this morning, I admit I clicked onto Facebook and I saw this, a quote from Michael Josephson, who I don't know. It's kind of a long litany, 2 lines. When, in effect, push comes to shove, we will all die. We will all be gone, COVID or not. And what matters, I guess what I really started out wanting to say, and why I'm saying all this, is for us to take this moment and think about, feel into, and I'm sure you do this anyway, but what a moment to feel into what's really important for me in my life, what's really significant. Life is short no matter what. It might get a whole lot shorter. We pray not for most of us, but we see it around us. What am I going to really stand on? Among many lines, he says, it's not what you bought, it's what you built. It's not what you got, it's what you gave. It's a very kind of touching moment to think about such words because, you know, as the I Ching famously says, a crisis is also an opportunity for those of us who get through the crisis. So it's kind of a dramatic and momentous and therefore meaningful time for us to reflect on what is important. How can we make time in our lives for what's important? Or maybe another way to put it is, how can we see that what takes the time in our lives, our work, our families, represents to us what is important? We want to help. We see our work as helping, for example. So this was, Rinpoche coming forth with this message seems to be very, certainly for me, impactful. And we have a couple minutes here, and I'd like, there's so much wisdom in front of me on the screen, to take a moment, if you would like. I'm sure you have also had thoughts along these lines, and just to share them for a moment among friends. I would love to hear your own reflections.
Caroline.
Okay, Mark and Carolyn. I don't know who was first. Carolyn and then Mark. Did you raise your hand, Carolyn? Because I didn't see it. Oh, she did. I didn't see Mark. Go ahead.
So me?
Yeah, you.
Okay. I was reflecting. I think when you're talking about our interdependence, these last couple of weeks also have made it clear that to me at least, I've been ignoring how we can negatively impact others through our interdependence, and so either we can negatively impact someone else, and I think there's a lot of I'm quick to go to shame, and then if I see somebody else doing something that impacts someone else, dealing with anger is also something I don't feel usually comfortable doing, and so I realized that I haven't been bringing that idea to that part of my life. I've only been using it. Oh, this is pleasant. We can be related. But then this idea that, oh, you have to be responsible. It's on you. It's on them. Not bringing it to the negative side.
Thank you. That's so profound. Thank you. Thank you. While we're waiting for someone else to raise your hand. Oh, okay, Cheryl.
I've been listening to a new podcast by Brene Brown when I'm going for walks this weekend. She has one with David Kessler, who co-wrote with, forgetting her name now, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross about death and dying.
Yeah.
And he has written something new that talks about the sixth stage, about making sense of it. But they in their conversation talk about how we are now going through a collective grieving process. Usually it's somebody grieving something separate, like a divorce or a death. But now we're all collectively grieving the loss of our lives, what we were living before, and how important it is to respect that everybody grieves in different ways, and to give compassion for that. Just, if people are interested, I encourage you to go listen to it. It's really fascinating.
People are interested in what? This sounds a little blurred.
People are collectively grieving, and everyone grieves in their own way.
Or grieves in their own way, indeed.
And the ways that we just need to be compassionate and understand that everybody grieves in their own way.
Yes, very.
So it's really a powerful podcast.
Yeah.
This really spoke to me and made me be a little more, I think, compassionate and aware at home, because I'm living with my son and my husband. We are just different, and we've been able to. We have the luxury of being able to separate ourselves and do what we have to do, and it's worked fine. But just to be compassionate for other people who aren't in those sorts of situations, and able.
Absolutely, that's the broad vision. I think what a broad vision allows. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Anyone else? I know you think about these things. Your mention of anger reminded me, Mark, but I also know that sometimes we call it anger, but it's really kind of frustration and concern for others. It's a little different than wanting to harm. So it's a good reaction. Yeah. Well, now it's 11 o'clock.
So broadcast team, how does this work? Are you going to be shifting over to another?
Yes, I just need a couple minutes.
Okay. Are you going to give us a different meeting number as well?
No, you'll stay on this meeting. So
Okay.
I can just let you know when I'm ready to get started for the meditation.
Great, thank you.